Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Dick Lavine. I'm the very senior fiscal analyst at the Center for Public Policy Priorities, here testifying against Senate Bill 2. But to make sure that we have enough time for questions and for Jennifer, I'll go through a lot of these points very quickly. But let me start with the positive aspects of the bill. You'll be seeing, I guess, after the break about the real-time database and the website that's already been prepared by Maria Krigler, the chief appraiser in Travis County. I think it's an excellent job that she's done, and just full disclosure, I was chairman of the board of directors when Maria was hired, and I was chairman until the end of 2017, and she has done an excellent job for the county and for the taxpayers.
The good news is you didn't prevent her from doing her good job, right?
Right. No, we just stood back and let her go. And the second part, just following some of the way Dale structured it, is I think a real innovation is taking the statement of estimated taxes off the notice of appraised value that's received in April and substituting that midsummer notice, by which time there's better information so you don't get that misleading number in April, which is almost always too high, as a matter of fact, and you redirect the taxpayers' attention from what's really a technical process of appraisals, which they can always protest, but onto the political process of budget setting and rate setting in the city council, in the school district, in the commissioner's court, and that's where their focus should be, and that's when the trade-off is. You want these many services, you have to pay that many taxes. That's what we should be talking about, and a lot of that came from Dale's organization and from Debbie Cartwright, and I commend them for that. On the sections about the ARB and the protest procedures, you may know a lot of effort was put in on the House side during the interim stakeholders meetings that grew to encompass, as far as I could tell, everybody with an interest in this, and they worked through in great detail. And I suggest you take a look at what was done there and roll it into your bill before it gets to the House, because I believe it's a consensus point of view and will streamline the process. Now, to get on to the 2.5%, just in the beginning, the question is, what is the inflation measure? You can't just look at the consumer price index. That's affected by things like whether Netflix raises its price or how much Amazon Prime costs. What you have to look at is the cost of things that cities and counties and school districts have to pay for. And there are different measures, GDP deflators for that. And the controller, and I think it was the December fiscal notes in their monthly publication, has the education cost index and the highway cost index. It's a much better way to look at things. I didn't have a chance to check. I wouldn't be surprised if they're over 2.5% already. So what you would be doing is freezing, subject to voter approval, the ability of local taxing units to increase their spending at all, and that would be assuming this is the best of all possible worlds. But let me go on to school finance, because that's really the key. Obviously, more than half the property taxes paid in Texas go to schools. And there's just a lot of questions. I mean, it's, as far as I can tell in this bill, it's sort of ghosted. It's just disappeared. We need to know, is this just a revenue neutral swap like in 2006, where schools cut their taxes? The state tried at least to create a new funding source by changing to the franchise tax to replace that revenue? Or is this really going to be an increase of investment in our schools and in our future? And how will this be done? As I understood, the governor's plan is presented to the School Finance Commission. I had real questions about school finance equity. At least equity is defined by the courts starting in the Edgewood cases in the 1980s and moving forward, where you get roughly equal yield for equal effort. That's something that's important to watch and may be coming out of Senator Taylor's committee. Then, of course, if the state is going to be putting in more money, the question is, where is that money coming from? And is it a sustainable source of revenue and an adequate source of revenue and an equitable source of revenue? And I brought around to your offices, and I do have extra copies of two pieces we've put out called Who Pays Texas Taxes and Who Doesn't Pay Texas Taxes, and it's a summary of the Controller's Tax Exemption Tax Incidence Study. Now, I did present, here it is, these are from the Controller. Can you go back to the Here are the first two. This shows the volatility of property values in the state from 1997 to 2017 and state sales tax revenue on the right. And you can see the property values, with the exception of the global financial crisis, have always been positive. It is, whatever you think of it, a sustainable and reliable source of revenue for our local governments and for our schools. On the right is the sales tax revenue. So you know the sales tax now brings in almost 60% of total state tax revenue. It jumps up and down. It's grown as fast as 12% a year. It's dropped as much as 6% a year. And you can see in this chart over that 20-year period, it's dropped five times. It's been minus 5 times. But if you go to the next one, this is severance tax revenue. And I know that's been considered as an option for funding our schools. The trouble is, it jumps all over the place. It's been a high of 85% increase year to year, and a low of a minus 50% increase year to year. And out of these 20 years, 8 of those years, which is 40%, it's been minus. So when we're talking about a sustainable and reliable source of revenue, I think that you have to give credit to the property tax as a good source of revenue and watch out for the severance tax. And then, just talking about millennials looking for homes. As you know, I was in California over the weekend visiting my son and his family. They have a toddler. They're hoping for a second child. They would like to buy a house. And the first thing they need to look for is the schools. And the problem in California is ever since Prop 13, where they put completely outrageous appraisal caps on and limits on the ability of their local governments to raise revenue, the schools have been very disappointing. When I was in high school and college, which was in the 1960s, California was well known for the best schools in the country. That's no longer true, and I think it's directly because of Prop 13 and undue restrictions on the ability to raise property taxes. Thank you.
No, thank you, Dick. And again, thank you for 5 seconds to yield it back. Senator Hancock.
And thank you, Dick. I just want to go back because I think words mean something. You talked about stagnant education funding. Has the state ever not in total funding for education addressed student enrollment growth and inflation?
It always, by the nature of the program, of the formulas, addressed enrollment growth. I don't think it has ever addressed inflation, to tell you the truth. I heard Senator Taylor. I'm not sure that's right. And I think one of the things to be looking for is not just raising the basic allotment, but indexing it to some cost driver so it's automatic, doesn't have to sit there for years at a time.
Let me ask the numbers guy. Dale, have you ever known the state not to address student enrollment growth and inflation in education spending?
Student enrollment growth is automatically incorporated in the foundation program. The component that one could equate to inflation would be tying the guaranteed yield to Austin's values. But a direct inflation component adjusting the basic allotment is not a part of that.
Right, and so stay there, so say it again, what do we do with Austin?
As Austin's values increase, we use its revenue per pupil as a guarantee on the enrichment tier.
Okay, and so what's happened with Austin's values and their student enrollment?
Their student enrollment has declined, their values have increased, consequently that guarantee has increased.
Can you tell me the impact on the state budget? Let me help you. It's $2 billion increase in state budget by using the Austin yield. So I would say we have never been stagnant, especially using Austin as our yield, because in the nature of Austin, property values escalating, some of the highest levels in the state, student enrollment dropping, the Austin yield actually significantly increases the state's budget towards education simply by the formula.
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Excuse me, it is tied, those are the golden pennies, which are 6 pennies out of the, in many cases, $1.17. So
right, and
it is a cost.
The cost of the budget is $2 billion.
That's correct, but it's a small part of the total yield per penny for school districts.
Well, but
the $2 billion adjustment is more than a small adjustment. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the number, but $2 billion.
Okay,
right.
We can help
covers a little bit.
We can help with numbers.
we can help with that. And by the way, any change we make. Okay, we've talked about it. You've been to almost every one of the public school, the commission meetings, Dick, except when you would take time off to go see your family in California.
That's
God
right.
bless
That's
you for
important.
that. Right. We're talking billions and billions to be able to do this. You know that any solution we have, there's no ghosting here. There's real money coming to do this. The commission statement talked about repurposing $5 billion and bringing in $3 billion of new money. And I do appreciate your comments always on tax source of revenues. It's important. Remember, however, you may not be able to count on the price of oil, but you can count on the production. Because once the production goes up, unless there's a general recession worldwide, those contracts are generally fulfilled. The question is what the price will be for that. So you count on a low price and a high production. That's a much less riskier situation than what happened in Oklahoma when they counted on a high price and a high production. We're not going to follow that path. We're going to keep our estimates conservative, but there are billions of dollars being discussed and have been all last year, and we're not going to change that. I'm glad that you like the real-time database.
Yes, I think that's very informative.
Right, and the statement of notices as well as those comments, and we deferred all questions of equity on the commission to Chairman Brister, who actually had something to do with equity, rulings in the past. But we're going to be working hand in hand with the Education Committee on the subject, so I appreciate your comments. Okay, and with that, any other questions for Dick? Thank you so much for your testimony.